The Middle East has become a center of war with clashes between the U.S. and pro-Iranian armed groups. The region has most recently witnessed U.S. airstrikes against Iranian-backed groups in Iraq and Syria. The strikes reportedly destroyed more than 85 targets and killed 23 pro-Iranian armed members. The facilities hit included command and control operations centers, intelligence buildings, drone depots, weapons depots with rockets and missiles, logistics and ammunition supply chain facilities. In addition to these targets, 8 outposts used by Iranian operatives in Iraq and Syria were destroyed in the latest U.S. airstrikes in the region. It was expected that new reports on casualties would be forthcoming and that many more targets of pro-Iranian armed groups would be reported destroyed. This is because the U.S. used more than 125 munitions during the airstrikes, and the scale, intensity, and impact of the strikes were considerable. For this reason, very critical data emerged today on U.S. airstrikes on military sites used by Iranian-backed armed groups in Syria and Iraq, together with the Revolutionary Guards. According to the latest data, the area near Deir ez-Zor on the Euphrates River in eastern Syria, which was clearly one of the main targets of the operation and where Iranian-backed militant activity was concentrated, no longer exists. Today's satellite imagery shows the complete destruction of the largest large weapons depot in the region, used by the Revolutionary Guards and Iranian-backed groups near the city of Deir ez-Zor in eastern Syria, which was allegedly hit during the U.S. strike. Pre-strike and post-strike images reveal the munitions storage facility reduced to a series of burnt-out craters. It is believed that only U.S. B-1 bombers could have created these craters. The facility in Ayash, about half a dozen miles north of Deir ez-Zor, has been hit before. In 2022, American aircraft struck the facility after a series of attacks on facilities housing U.S. personnel. In that attack, the larger bunkers at the site were also destroyed. At the time, the facility was allegedly used by the Fatemiyun Brigade, an armed group funded and trained by the Revolutionary Guards. It is puzzling why these weapons storage buildings were left untouched for so long. The facility dates back to the second half of the 2000s. Now there is nothing left of it. Pro-Iranian armed groups have been deprived of a major military resource center. In fact, the impact of this destruction has already enveloped the pro-Iranian armed groups. After U.S. airstrikes destroyed the massive weapons storage facility in the eastern Syrian city of Deir ez-Zor, up to 20,000 pro-Iranian armed groups reportedly fled the area. These groups are said to have fled to the Iraqi border or Jordan, but the Jordanian government has repeatedly denied providing support to pro-Iranian armed groups. After these unthinkable airstrikes, the expected reaction came from Iran. Iran said the U.S. strikes in Iraq and Syria were a strategic mistake and would lead to further tensions and instability in the Middle East, which Israel's military action against Gaza has exacerbated. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Nasser Kana'ani said in a statement that the U.S. attacks are a clear violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iraq and Syria, a violation of international law, and a clear violation of the United Nations Charter. These angry and threatening statements by Iranian officials are probably due to the fact that the United States has destroyed a large weapons depot in Syria, which is used even by the Revolutionary Guards. This has also been proven through political channels. In other words, Iran is in a major stalemate over the U.S. elimination of one of the largest weapons storage facilities in Syria. That is why Tehran is believed to have mobilized armed units in the region. In fact, this idea has been proven by the recent attempt to attack U.S. military bases in Iraq. In northern Iraq, 3 one-way suicide drones were captured over the Al-Harir air base near the city of Erbil, as well as over the Rumelan landing zone in Hasaka Governorate and the U.S. patrol base in the Conoco gas fields. Explosions were reported near the U.S. patrol base in the Conoco gas field near the city of Deir ez-Zor in eastern Syria and possible air defense activities. Despite today's denial of the participation of the Jordanian armed forces in these airstrikes, members of the Iraqi House of Representatives submitted a motion to suspend subsidized oil sales to the Kingdom of Jordan for its participation in airstrikes against the U.S. base in the region. In response, however, the Jordanian government has recently expressed its respect for Iraq's sovereignty and the enduring fraternal ties between the other Arab states. As many countries in the region continue to issue statements on the latest developments in the Middle East, there is growing curiosity about the future policies of the United States. According to many military sources, the U.S. retaliatory airstrikes against targets in Iraq and Syria will not be the last. However, it is believed that any future U.S. strikes will probably be known in advance, just like in the last case. Recall that the last time the U.S. carried out airstrikes in Iraq and Syria, it both delayed and announced them in advance. The Pentagon said that the timing of the strikes was determined by weather conditions. In order to minimize civilian casualties, the military officials who planned the U.S. strikes waited until the weather cleared to be absolutely certain of their targets. When asked whether the delay had removed the Revolutionary Guard's people from danger, Lieutenant General Sims, Director of Operations of the Joint Staff, pointed out that the militias attacking U.S. targets would disperse as soon as they ran out of weapons. Therefore, the number of days off did not make much difference. General Sims emphasized that the effect of the night attacks was to significantly reduce the Revolutionary Guard's stockpiles of weapons. Overall, the U.S. response was calibrated to maximize the destruction of Iran's weapon stockpiles in Syria and Iraq, while minimizing the risk of a direct U.S.-Iran conflict. It is noteworthy that 3 of the facilities targeted in the U.S. airstrikes were in Iraq. There was some speculation that U.S. planners could have avoided this. This was because Baghdad was considering allowing a continued U.S. military presence after a previous U.S. attack on Iraqi territory. With the latest strikes and the U.S. targeting facilities used by pro-Iranian armed groups in Iraq, different details may emerge on this issue. The Iraqi government could again demand that U.S. forces leave the country. There were last reported to be 2,500 U.S. troops in the region. At the moment, the White House may even plan to increase this military presence. But it is not known what kind of relationship this decision will create between the U.S. and the Iraqi government. The U.S. has 4 main objectives in the Middle East. Pentagon Press Secretary Air Force Brigadier General confirmed that the Department of Defense currently has 4 lines of action in the Middle East. The first is the protection of U.S. forces and citizens in the region. The second is to keep critical security assistance flowing to Israel while defending against further attacks by Hamas. The third is coordination with the Israelis to help free hostages held by Hamas, including American citizens. The final objective is to strengthen force posture across the region to prevent any state or non-state actor from escalating the crisis beyond Gaza. The strengthened force posture includes more than 30,000 U.S. military personnel in the Middle East. It also includes the deployment of an Ohio-class submarine and the USS Gerald R. Ford and USS Dwight D. Eisenhower carrier strike groups currently based in the U.S. Central Command area. What is Iran's policy on this issue? The Tehran government does not want to throw itself directly into the clashes in the Middle East. That is why we are witnessing proxy wars in the region. Tehran seems to have no choice but to support such a war by providing military and material resources to the armed forces on the line of tension. The direct deployment of Iranian troops to Iraq and Syria and their use in attacks against U.S. bases could lead to unmanageable problems in the region. For this reason, Iran does not want to risk waging a war against the joint power of the U.S. and NATO. Despite these hesitant policies, it is worth noting that Iran's power has begun to grow in the region. This is thanks to Russia, an alleged ally of Iran. Initial expectations that the need to concentrate all resources on confronting the West and winning the war with Ukraine would force Russia to reduce its presence in the Middle East were only marginally justified. Indeed, Moscow's military capabilities to increase its forces in the region have diminished. The Kremlin was forced to reduce its military presence in Syria, and even hand over control of some Syrian territory to Iran and its proxies. In Libya, Russia is also trying not to draw too much attention to its ongoing military contacts with Haftar, preferring diplomatic games designed to diversify the Kremlin's ties in the Libyan theater. In other words, Moscow seems intent on limiting its military involvement in regional affairs. While Russia's lack of involvement in regional affairs may seem to be strengthening Iran's power, Tehran has actually lost a very important ally, especially in Syria. Therefore, the U.S. and the Joint Coalition military forces in the region must act quickly. This is because Iran is likely to receive military resources from associated countries in order to consolidate its power in the Middle East. These resources would normally go to armed groups in Iraq and Syria. In short, the U.S. should take the first step before Iran makes a move. Thank you for following us.